A couple more tips and tricks for you in Visual Studio, this time focusing on multi-caret editing. In previous lectures I mentioned the fact that we can save some time by combining the backspace and the delete keys. That is when I do my editing. So for example, let's say I go down here and I click the caret between the I and the S. Then I press backspace, and then instead of going and clicking over here and pressing backspace again to delete the S, or selecting both of those and pressing backspace, I can simply press backspace and then delete. Okay, so delete will delete the character to the right of the caret. The backspace key will delete the character to the left of the caret. Okay, I mentioned this in a previous lecture, and similarly multi-caret editing, once you get used to it, can save you some time. Now what do I mean by multi-caret editing? Well, for example, I'll click over here, and typically you have this flickering caret. My caret does not flicker, but yours probably will. That's just based on my settings, but it's this vertical bar, right? So you can have multiple carets. Currently we only have one over here, but let's say I want to make changes to these variables up here. Let's say I want to add a 0 at the end, so instead of 1, 2, and 3, I want 10, 20, and 30 to initialize these variables. Okay, so instead of doing 0 here, then 0, and so on, I can press and hold Control and Alt. Okay, and then I can left click where I want to place another caret. Now we can see we have multiple carets. The red one is the primary one, and then we have these blue secondary carets. And now we can make our changes. Add a bunch of zeros maybe, or whatever we want to do. Of course, those are not simply for adding text. We can also move them around, so we can press the left and right arrows, for example. Similarly, we can do selections. So we can press and hold Shift and the right arrow. And maybe we want to set all of those to 1, for example. Just press 1 or 2 or whatever you want to do. To clear the selection, or in other words to get rid of those multiple carets, you can simply left click somewhere, or you can press Escape. And now you will have only your primary caret. See where the red caret was, that will now be where your caret selection is. Or it will place the caret where you left click. Just go and undo that. Go and undo that, left click to clear that selection. You can also do a box selection by pressing and holding Alt and left click and drag. And then you can see we also have multiple carets. And of course this will depend on your formatting, because currently, let's say we have this text. Let's say I want to change this text right here. I can go and select those and change those, but of course things don't always line up in this way, especially with our printouts. Things don't always line up the way that we would expect, but sometimes they do, and then the box selection is handy. So again, press and hold Alt, left click and drag out. Now I can change the type of those to float or double or whatever I want. You can also add the next matching text to the selection. For example, if I go and select X here, I can press Shift, Alt, and period. Now I have X selected, so I can go and change that maybe to P. Let's say I do something similar, but I go one too far, so I want to select Y here. So I do Shift, Alt, and period. But maybe I press that one too many times. Now we can remove the last selection. I don't want to change Y at the top to Q, because we'll get a conflict with that, of course. So I want to remove that from my selection instead of redoing it. So I can do Shift, Alt, and comma. And that is going to remove the last selected item. Now I can do Q, and that will work fine. If you want to skip the next matching text, then you can do the /. So for example, you can do Shift, Alt, and period to select that next years right here. But let's say we want to skip that for some reason, then we do Shift, Alt, and the /. And now we have those two selected. Let's just go and select P here, for example. That will select those two. Let's say we want to skip that one. Shift, Alt, and the /, and that will jump to the next one. Then we can also select, well, that is add all matching text to the selection. So I'll select this years right here. Let's say we don't want to add these. Of course you can do a box selection, but as I mentioned before, that's not going to always work based on how you have your console output. It's not to say that it's going to line up. So what we can do is we can press Shift, Alt, and semicolon. Now it will select all of the matching text, and I can do backspace here. Let's say I don't want to have those years repeating, and let's just build around that. Alright, and with that is going to wrap up a look at multi-caret editing in Visual Studio. Really fun and interesting way of text editing in Visual Studio using multiple carets. And this can save you some time once you get used to it. And because of that, they are really worth practicing, regardless of whether you use the mouse cursor to select everything, or whether you prefer to edit and do your selections with the keyboard. Of course, again, this is a simple example, but in larger text files and in larger projects where you have many variables and so on, and you do multiple printouts and so on, this can get really handy. So with that, we are going to wrap up this lecture. I'll see you next time.